and then the environment was cleaned up.
First time I was hearing about this stuff. Wow. It was totally new to me.
With social impact consulting. Hello everyone, my name is Efwa Elens Ede with Social Impact Consulting. I'm a development consultant with 20 years of experience working with NGOs, international NGOs, and bilateral agencies to work in project support, monitoring and evaluation, and civil society strengthening. So now, I saw that local NGOs lack the capacity to manage large-scale projects, which can in turn impact their various communities because they have the connection based on their backgrounds. So this made me create this channel so that I can add value to you for free once you subscribe to this channel and get notified of upcoming videos. I look forward to hearing from you. Hello everyone. Welcome again to another week of the Development Sector Series, which is Devsectorseries. Please make sure you like and share this broadcast so that we can reach more people. Let me know where you're watching from too so I can thank you personally. Follow and connect with me on all my social media handles for future updates. If you have any questions about the discussion in this program, include them in the comments so that we can engage in an interactive discussion. Today, we're going to be covering conversations about security forces and their role in the shrinking civic space. Look, it is in the interest of all stakeholders, including state and non-state actors, to keep the civic space open. This has been my belief for over 2 decades. But my turning point happened a few days ago from the siege that occurred in Afghanistan. Government, private sector, civil society, and humanitarian organizations are all affected. If the civic space is closed, there'll be no career to develop. There'll be no business to run. There'll be no freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of expression. So to begin these conversations with all stakeholders in our society, that's what I'm going to be doing, to discuss this state of emergency. And this is not just affecting Nigeria. The civic space is either being repressed or closed in different parts of the world. But today I have a special guest. Our guest, Mr. Okechukwu Nwanguma, which we commonly call him OK. He is the Executive Director of the Rule of Law and Accountability Advocacy Center, RULAAC. The calling of national development came to him in the university when he was a student union president. He has been an advocate for police reform and human rights. As a result, he is a thought leader on this subject, not only on national, but on international media. I'll go over his video bio before introducing him on this afternoon. Okechukwu Nwanguma is the Executive Director of the Rule of Law and Accountability Advocacy Center, RULAAC, and has continued to monitor, document, and publicize cases of human rights abuses in Nigeria. Nwanguma has been involved in efforts to promote the observance of human rights and the growth of democracy in Nigeria since his days at the University of Nigeria, where he stood out as a student activist. He served as a speaker of the Student Union of Representatives and helped to form a youth group in support of the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa. Okechukwu was a project officer of the Police Research Project, later Zonal Director of the Southeast Zone, and later again Project Head for Campaign Operations and Periodic Reports in the Nigeria's Civil Liberties Organization, CLO, for 13 years up to 2008. He is the founding member of NOPRIN and has participated in field research projects, including on the patterns and prevalence of police abuse in Nigeria. The report of this research, entitled Criminal Force, Torture, Abuse, and Extrajudicial Killings by the Nigerian Police Force. Currently, he works also in collaboration with the National Human Rights Commission and other oversight agencies, organized public tribunals, which provided opportunity for survivors and representatives of victims of police abuse to testify before a panel of eminent persons about the brutalities and abuse, and to seek redress through mechanisms of internal control and external accountability. He's a Reagan Fascio Democracy Fellow in 2008 at the International Forum for Democratic Studies, hosted by the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, in Washington, D.C. Okechukwu Nwanguma obtained a BSc degree in philosophy from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, in 1992, and has participated in several capacity-building trainings on human rights in the nearly 24 years of his work as a human rights advocate. Allow me to introduce to some and present to others Okechukwu Nwanguma, the Executive Director of the Rule of Law and Accountability Advocacy Center. Hello, how you doing, sir?
Morning.
Good
Hello. How are
afternoon.
you? I'm happy to be here this morning.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your extremely busy schedule to have a conversation with us.
My pleasure.
So awesome. Again, thank you for the great work that you have been doing. You know, it's just sometimes, you know, we just have unsung heroes that are really helping us to make things better. So thank you again. Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
I hope that it gets clearer. It's not too clear. It's still
Really?
breaking.
Really?
Yeah.
Ah, my goodness. Hello, can you hear me? Is it better?
Can barely hear you.
Okay, let me do this. What about now? What about now? Can you hear me?
Okay.
Hello?
Let's hope it will.
Is it a lot clearer?
Move on.
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
You can hear me, but I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
That is interesting.
Hmm.
No, I can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Okay, this is interesting. Sorry about this. As you guys know, technology, no matter how hard you check, some things just are not working the way they should. So let me just try and re-add him, and hopefully this works out. Hello, hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you, but it's not stable.
It's still not stable.
Yeah,
This is serious.
Yeah.
I can hear you very clearly.
You can hear me well?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, let's roll. Hopefully it will improve.
Let's keep it rolling and then see what. Let's keep it rolling and then see what happens.
Okay.
Okay, awesome. All right, so let's get started. So, what made you get involved in police reform and human rights? Because you could have been involved in anything, you know, while you were in your student union days, but you decided to get into police reform. You decided to get into human rights. So, what's the story?
Thank you very much. Well, my venture into human rights activism dates back to my days in the university, my undergraduate days at the University of Nigeria, when as an active member of the Students' Union and one of the frontline leaders of the Students' Union. I stood in, for the students, my fellow students, and organized several peaceful protests against anti-students policies locally and against anti-democratic policies by government at the national level. As students in those days, we are under the platform of NANS, National Association of Nigerian Students, who were interested not only in the things that happen within our campuses, but also about national issues, governance, as well as international issues. In those days, during the apartheid struggle, we were all involved in the struggle, is solidarity with South African people to defeat, the racist regime and to destroy apartheid. But my venture into human rights activism started with my joining the civil liberties organization, Nigeria's foremost human rights movement, after I graduated and after I completed my national human rights service in the early 20s. So since then, I've been involved. I've held, I held a number of, I had a number of responsibilities as a project officer, as head of project police research project. Of course, my first job on unemployment was to work under Mr. Innocent Chukwuma, who was then the head of the police research project in Civil Liberties Organization. I was working under him as a project officer. And when he left, found the Clean Foundation, I took over as the head of police projects. And that's how my venture into police reform and advocacy, started. And ever since, I've remained on track, monitoring, documenting, and advocating for police reform in Nigeria.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that feedback in terms of just transitioning your career into police reform. And a lot of times when we get into something like that, it piques our interest, and then we just become experts at it. So, so my question. So let's talk macro now. What's this current state of security in Nigeria as we now know it?
Well, Nigeria is at the moment is confronted by a lingering and worsening hydra-headed crisis of insecurity. Not just crisis of insecurity, but also crisis of governance. Nigeria is even the more disturbingly also faced with a challenge of competent leadership that can effectively tackle the monster of insecurity, which poses grave existential threats. Everyday headlines, Nigerian newspapers, international newspapers, the headlines tell the story more alarmingly. You hear headlines about school children abducted en masse, communities, raised down by bandits, rendered homeless, find themselves in displaced persons camps where they also face threats. Some analysts have traced Nigeria's, security and governance crisis to colonial rule, which erected a religious ethnic divide that Nigeria inherited at independence. But of course, there are other, versions that trace insecurity to the emergence. Trace, for example, the emergence of, terrorism in Nigeria, Boko Haram, to factors such as bad governance, religious extremism, proliferation of small arms and light weapons, political greed, and foreign influence. Of course, as you know, military intervention in Nigeria, interrupted democratic governance and impeded the growth of democracy, and national progress. Today, 22 years after Nigeria returned to constitutional governance in 1999, very little progress has been made in the effort to consolidate democracy. Insecurity continues to fester. Boko Haram was the major security threat during the last administration. But under this current administration, we've had herdsmen, violence and conflict with farmers, banditry, kidnappings, school children being targeted en masse, which has, all these have exacerbated the security threats in Nigeria. Terrorist attacks and insurgency have led to loss of thousands of lives, Unrestrained invasion and attacks on communities by bandits and herdsmen have led to hundreds of deaths, destruction of property, displacement of persons. And as you know, every day we read stories of bandits abducting school children without any challenge from security agency, government negotiating with them, paying ransom to free school children. And this has created incentive for bandits to continue to abduct more of our children, threatening their safety and their future, which is, for me, is even the most dreadful. Of course, we've had sectarian conflict, separatist agitations, resource control agitations, and of course, excessive use of force, state terror by security agencies in the fight against insurgency, or even policing public order. All these, results to loss of lives and property. I was reading a report by the Crisis Group, and which said something like violence, particularly Boko Haram, having displaced more than 2 million people and created a massive humanitarian crisis and prompted the rise of civilian vigilante self-help. People now resort to self-help. Groups emerge which pose new policy dilemmas and possible security risk. And as you know, no part of Nigeria is spared the monster of insecurity and threat to communal leadership. There is no intervention and protection by security services for communities across Nigeria, which continue to suffer attacks by bandits. Many community members have been displaced and forced to take refuge. If you go to many states, you have internally displaced persons where they are also exposed to further attacks and violence. Women and girls more at risk, being raped every day. Security agencies fighting insurgency are also committing human rights violations, including profiling of young people, arrest, detention, indefinite detention, and detention in inhuman conditions. Torture remains, routine. Rape and other forms of sexual violence, enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killings. And the NSAS protest in 2020 marked the limits of tolerance for police brutality by Nigerian youths, who are actually the most affected. Nigerian youths, for once, after a long period of passivity, regained their voices courageously but peacefully protested against police brutality, demanding accountability, justice, and good governance. But of course, how it ended. Instead of addressing the legitimate demands of these young people, government responded with more terror. Of course, you know what happened, the massacre at the Lekki Gate. So, in all, government has failed in its primary obligation to protect communities and to arrest and bring perpetrators of crime and human rights violations to account. In many cases, as in 2006, I'm sure you recall the Nimbo, that's the community in Ozo1 in Nubu, called Nimbo, where some headsmen went on attack, and early information of impending attacks were ignored by security agencies, and the community members were left at the mercy of the bandits. Also in cases in Kaduna, southern Kaduna, where communities protested peacefully against incessant attacks by criminals. But the same security agencies who refused to intervene to protect them from criminals came to disrupt their peaceful protests, where they were simply calling the attention of government to protect them. So this generally has led to a loss of confidence. That's the widespread loss of trust and confidence in government, and this has created room for self-help narratives that amplify the fault lines, dangerous and divisive rhetoric that exacerbate tension, confusion, and instability. So generally, this has also led to calls for restructuring, calls for breakup, intensifying. In the absence of any effective response from government, state governments are beginning to come together to form regional security networks, Aboteku in the southwest, In the north, we also hear about governors, northeast governors, northern governors, southwest stakeholders, southeast governors coming together, to put in place one form of security or the other. And then this has led to crossfire between the federal government and some state governors. And here, I know you keep hearing what is happening between the Benue state governor and the federal government. All
Yes.
debates and calls for state police now resurface. Arguments emerge that there is no federal legislation supporting regional security and state police. In response, states begin to make state laws to back the state security outfits. Some have called on federal government to create guidelines for the regional security networks and for the commencement of state policing. So generally, this is the picture in summary of what the security situation looks like, unfortunately.
Thank you so much. That was quite, I think you even touched some of the questions that I'm getting ready to ask moving forward, but this was a very good overview. So let me ask a question. You touched on their role in the shrinking civic space a bit, but there's a lot to discuss in terms of the security forces and their role in the shrinking civic space. As you know, and as we know, the civic space is shrinking globally. You understand? So, like in Nigeria right now, what is the security forces? What's their role in the shrinking civic space?
I didn't get you clearly, but I guess you're asking the role of security forces in shrinking civic space?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Well, I will start by, saying that police in every democracy is expected, or charged to serve and to protect the population, not just a narrow interest or regime interest, but to serve the general population, to protect lives and property, and to defend and the human rights of the community. But of course, in authoritarian climes, the police have always served regime interests. Police is the public face of government in every democratic society, and it's also the entry point to the criminal justice system. In fact, you can measure how democratic any country is by measuring the extent to which the police in that society respects human rights and the rule of law. So how respectful the police is of human rights and rule of law is a measure of how democratic country is. Authoritarian regimes use the police to curtail freedom, especially freedom of expression and media freedom, freedom to freely and peacefully assemble and associate. These freedoms I have mentioned, freedom of association, assembly, association, define the civic space. And the civic space is the hallmark of an open and democratic society.
Definitely.
Now, Nigeria and other security agencies, the Nigerian police and other security agencies have been consistently used by the federal government and state governments as well to terrorize the population. They have been used to suppress freedoms and to shrink the space, civic space. You have, of course, currently we have cases of, attack on media freedom, attempts to use repressive and restrictive laws to regulate media and society. The height of it was, as you know, the ban on Twitter. Yes. Every day you hear the police issue bans on protests and clamp down on protesters, even peaceful protesters. And I'm sure you know that the right to assemble is a fundamental right guaranteed under the Constitution and under international law. So yes, these are fundamental rights. The police has no power under any law to ban the exercise of human rights by citizens. So when you hear the police say we ban protests or we ban assembly, that is acting outside their powers, So and that's why you see them clamp down on protesters. I already mentioned the use of state terror to break up the NSAS protest. That was the height of it. So all these have had the consequence of closing the civic space. We have a situation where democracy has been eroded in this country, and authoritarianism is creeping in, reversing the gains of democracy. So the police ought to serve and protect the people rather than repress, rather than oppress the people. It should help to, the police ought to, support democracy rather than undermine it. But what we see in the country by the activities of the security agencies is that they're actually undermining democracy.
Exactly. So we're going to go to the next question. But what you mentioned is that they are actually used as forces to actually undermine the democracy going outside their scope. So
Sure.
That is really something. So now that we've talked about their role in shrinking the civic space, how about their role in actually keeping it open? Do they have a responsibility to do that?
Yeah, in democratic societies, the police, as I mentioned earlier, are established and paid to serve and protect public interests and to act as guardians of democracy, guardians of human rights. And it was in recognition of this role of the police in supporting democracy that the new Police Act, in September 2020, the president signed the new Police Act into law. So that Police Act, in its preamble, tried to change, the police. At independence, Nigeria inherited the colonial police, which was, a police meant to suppress, to subjugate. So the new Police Act tried to change the vision, mission, and operational philosophy of the Nigerian police, as opposed to the colonial philosophy that we had in the previous law, to bring the vision and operations of the police in line with policing in a democracy, to fulfill their mandates and guardians of human rights. So the Police Act also expanded the duties of the police to include protection of human rights, service to the people, especially to the needy and the vulnerable, engagement with the community, and accountability to the people it serves. But the actions of the police are currently, as I said earlier, are nowhere near the requirements of the law. The recent revelations of, and I can't fail to say this, that the recent revelations of involvement of Abba Kyari in corruption, abuse of power, even though it's education, professional acts of abuse of power and professional standards illustrate the pains that Nigerians suffer on a daily basis in the hands of a predatory and oppressive police.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so that means that they do have a role, and that's proven by the law that was passed last year. Okay, so we will get into the next question. I'm going to just talk to the audience. If you have any questions for Mr. Nwanguma, please put it in the comment section so that we can ask right after this section, so that we can have a robust conversation about the Nigerian police force. So I want to just talk a little bit about what happened with Abba Kyari. Like, how does that happen within the system that, of course, we hear it around the world where there are corrupt police officers, but how is that being perpetuated in the Nigerian police force, where they are being incriminated by criminals for being complicit?
I'm not sure I had to. It's
Okay.
beginning to break.
Okay, it's breaking up again. I was talking about the Abba Kyari case.
Yes.
In terms of, yes. So how do they get away with such acts for this long?
Well, you see, unfortunately, for some of us who have been, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Are you hearing me?
Yes.
I think that's a.
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay, great, great. So, I mean, it didn't come to many of us, particularly those of us who have been engaging with the police over a long time. We surprised. It didn't come to us with a surprise. What actually surprised us is that a lot of people, reacted as though there is something new or something more grievous than what we have seen in the past. In the past, a lot of us have exposed more grievous atrocities, more grievous crimes. Unfortunately, the successive police administrations have failed to, rein in this kind of um, criminal behavior that has been ongoing over the years. Unfortunately, it appears that those who ought to put a stop to this kind of behavior, this criminal behavior, are actually beneficiaries of crime, police crime. So that's why it seemed that they didn't want to do anything. The reason this one is generating all these debate is because it's coming from FBI, from America. But I can assure you, there are more serious, criminal activities that these and other officers in the Nigerian police have been involved in. So for us, it's nothing new. We only hope that this one will provide a basis to deal with, this kind of, criminal behavior within the Nigerian police, and to fundamentally reform the police to eliminate corruption and that.
Okay. Okay. So we're going to go into the next question. So we've just talked about corruption, right? So are there any attempts right now to reform the police force from within? And how is it being received? And is there any kind of implementation?
Well, the first that I earlier mentioned, the new Police Act. As you know, the law that up to 2020, the law that governed the Nigerian police, the Police Act, was promulgated by the colonial authorities as far back as 1943. And from 1943 up to 2020, there was no review of that law. So the Nigerian police continued to be regulated by a colonial law, which rather than enhance professionalism, actually, made it difficult for the police to operate, in a professional, way. So the coming into force of the new Police Act, for me, was a major step in the effort to reform the Nigerian police. What is left is, that act has a lot of, good innovative provisions addressing a number of challenges within the police. It's only, of course, it is not a perfect law, and it doesn't need to, but at least for the first time, we have a new law that repeals and replaces the Colonial Act. It's only left for its implementation. But before then, you know that the Complaints Response Unit was created by a former IGP, Solomon Arase. The Complaints Response Unit was a platform, to provide, it provides different platforms, social media platforms, for citizens to send complaints of police misconduct and expect that their complaints will be addressed. That complaints, that mechanism was also codified under the Police Act. Is one of the new provisions in the Act. It's expected that it will receive complaints from public and address those complaints. But unfortunately, this unit is not being properly funded, and its personnel are not given the tools that they need to, deal with public complaints. And then there has also been human rights education organized by civil society groups. Different civil society organizations have been carrying out human rights education for the Nigerian police. And of course, more importantly, civil society advocacy led to the passing into law of the Police Trust Fund. The Police Trust Fund is meant to provide a new window for additional funding for the police. The federal government has, over the years, been able to adequately fund the police. And poor funding of the police is partly responsible for corruption, for ineffectiveness, because when the police don't have the resources to recruit, to train, to buy equipment, to pay their personnel well, it makes them prone to corruption and abuse. So we hope that the police trust fund will be run in a transparent and accountable manner so as to provide additional funds to enable the police, acquire the equipment, the training, and resources they need to operate more effective. So there has been different efforts at police reform, and we do hope that both from within and from outside, and we hope that these things which commit. But I think that what is more important is for the government to show commitment, genuine commitment to police reform, by providing what the police do the work they need to do.
Okay, I think there are some things that stuck out here with regards to like a police complaints desk for police to be able to take complaints from citizens, and then another thing I heard was the police trust fund. Now, where is the source of the trust fund from? The government budget, or is it from donors, from philanthropy? Like, where is that trust fund from, and what makes it different from the regular police budget? And would there be any form of corruption? Would there be windows of corruption in that fund as well, just like in many others? So it's just, these are some of the things that I'm asking.
Well, the police fund, a trust fund, the police trust fund is actually meant to be an intervention fund. It aims to ensure speedy response to needs. They are under the Act establishing the police trust fund. It's supposed to get for contributions from the government, the what is it called now? The allocation from the federation accounts. Supposed to also get some initial funds to commence work. I can't remember exactly what it is called. Certain percentage from all companies doing work in the country, and then tax, from certain companies. So there are about 3 or 4 different sources of the fund, both from government and from
private sector.
The private sector, yeah. But the truth is that the way the trust fund is structured, the challenge is that the way it is structured, it's not likely going to make any difference, because it's still dominated by government people. A trust fund ought to operate independently of government. It's supposed to be run by it's supposed to be private sector driven. And we have been doing a lot of advocacy around this police trust fund to try to restructure it in such a way that it will be able to speedily respond to the needs, the urgent needs that the police have, to be able to address certain security concerns, but also to ensure that the funds generated are managed in an accountable and transparent manner without going the way of previous funds that were established under previous government. If it is properly run in a transparent and accountable manner, it will play a role. It will help to alleviate address the funding deficit in the Nigerian police, but it needs to be restructured.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of like well, we're in a bit of a conundrum, because if we have a trust fund, it should be different from the regular police budget, because if there's a police trust fund and it's still run by government, then it means that there's really not much of a difference. So that was just an observation. Hopefully the advocacy is successful and we're able to talk to the right people to see how the corporate governance of that can be handled. Okay. Our next question. So you touched on it in earlier conversations on state police, right? And a lot of conversations have been going back and forth. Like you talked about the governors talking about state police, even citizens are talking about state police. Is this a possible solution to what we're having with the nationalized version of the police force that we have? Is it a solution, or will it exacerbate the problem? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, calls for state police in Nigeria, calls for state police are not new. Are not new in Nigeria. Calls for state police have remained recurrent. The current call, gained new. The call gained new momentum each time insecurity increasing, or something spectacular happens with regards to insecurity in Nigeria. Growing insecurity in Nigeria has given, additional push to the clamor by those who believe that state police is the answer to the failure of the Nigerian police as presently constituted or structured to deal with insecurity. So this is what happens. This is what is happening now. People are beginning to make that call because of increasing incidents of terrorist attacks by Boko Haram, kidnapping by bandits, invasion and attacks on communities and farmlands by armed herdsmen, and the total failure by the police to tackle these menacing crimes. The failure by the police to protect the people is what has led to erosion of public confidence and resort to communities, resorting to, resort by communities to self-help in the form of vigilante groups, neighborhood security, and so on and so forth. But of course, you know that the Constitution, the Nigerian Constitution, 1999 Constitution, provides for only one police force in Nigeria and prohibits the establishment of any other police. But in spite of this, provision, many states have set up bodies that carry out law enforcement duties in response to the need to address certain concerns in their various states and to fill the gap left by the federal police. So these agencies enforce specific state laws relating to, like in Lagos,
Hello, are you still there?
Yes, I'm there. I'm here.
Yeah,
so, like in Lagos,
okay.
Are you hearing me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So, so I said in some states have set up different bodies that carry out law enforcement duties in response to the peculiar needs in their various states. These agencies enforce, things like environment, traffic. In the north, you have, bodies enforcing Sharia law and so on and so forth. At the regional levels, like I earlier mentioned, you have regions, southeast, and so on. All these points towards a tendency to decentralizing security. So it's been argued that centralized security cannot work in a federal system, and I think that is what is playing out. Policing, as you know, everywhere is local. States have powers, and Nigeria states have powers to make laws, but they are not allowed by the Constitution to create, state police to enforce state laws. Federal police decides which state laws to enforce. Of course, we have state electoral commissions, we have state high courts, we have, state assemblies. So if states have assemblies that make laws for them, why can't they also have state police to enforce those laws? One of the key impediments to effective performance by the Nigerian police is it is highly centralized structure. Nigeria is too big to have a one-size-fits-all police. There is need, therefore, to decentralize resources and policing authority And this has been strongly advocated by policing authorities. You remember that during the First Republic, the federal police existed side by side with the regional police. It was military rule that centralized policing in Nigeria as a means to effectively control and use the police to sustain authoritarian rule. One of the key recurrent arguments by those who oppose state police is that it will be abused and misused by state governors for political and selfish advantage. Now, while the fears are founded, considering past experiences, it cannot be an all-time barrier to the establishment of state police. Past experience should act as a guide, not an all-time barrier. So we need to engage in informed debate around the issue of best practices in the appointment, operations, management, and control of police. After all, federal authorities, including the president, past presidents, who control the federal police, have always abused, manipulated, and abused the police. We have witnessed cases in this country, in Nigeria, where a president used the police to abduct a sitting governor. I'm sure you remember that.
I remember, yeah.
We also have witnessed the invasion of the official residence of a sitting Senate president in this country on the orders of a president. So the federal government uses the police to rig elections and to hunt down political opponents and critics. Yet we have continued to retain the same federal police. What is needed, therefore, is to come up with measures to insulate the police, whether the federal police or the state or even local police. In some climes, we have local police. We have even in universities, they have police. You know, so to insulate the police from political control and make them accountable to multiple constituencies, not to reject the imperative for decentralizing policing for effective performance. Many governors in both the South and North today are in favor of state police, including those who opposed it before. The federal government is unable to adequately fund the police. That one is clear. Even as that is their responsibility. Federal government budget for the police. I don't know whether you have looked at any budget for the police in any year. Federal government budget for the police represents a mere contribution to police funding. State governments are the lifelines of the police in various states. Yet they don't control them. A state commissioner of police, for example, will have to refer to the IGP before he complies with a directive by the state governor. That's the reality. So government should establish a committee to work out modalities for the establishment of a state police in states that want to maintain state police, with a view to recommending the framework and measures that should be put in place to address the concerns against state police. And of course, and like I said earlier, state police should only be established on a basis of strict adherence to the principles of operational autonomy and be based on sound professional practice in appointments, operations, and control.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. So if anybody has questions about that, I know that is a controversial topic. So if you have any questions about state police, you can put that down so that we can go further into it after this discussion. So now I'm going to go into the NSAS protest that happened last year. There is a judicial panel of inquiry all around the country just to talk about the victims of NSAS protests and also victims of SARS period. So I wanted to get a sense of what the current status is. Are people getting restitution? Are people getting justice? Can you give us a sense of what is happening with regards to judicial panel of inquiry?
I can't hear you now.
Yeah, the judicial panel.
The audio is low. I can't hear you.
You can't hear me. Okay.
Yeah, the audio is very low now.
Wow. Can you hear me?
I don't know whether it's from my end. I've tried to increase the volume.
And the audience said that they can hear both of us. So I don't know why that's happening. They say they can hear both of us. But can you hear me now? I think I'm getting Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Hello?
Were you asking me about the NSAS?
Yes, the judicial panel.
The judicial panels?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, I didn't clearly hear the question, but I understand you're asking me about the judicial panel of inquiry happening around the country. Well, I mean, in the aftermath of the NSAS protest, well, I do know that Lagos State has the Lagos State panel has an extension of 3 months, although it has awarded compensations to quite a number of victims who appeared before it.
Okay.
I also know that in many cases where the police were invited, police officers who were implicated in cases of violation were invited. Some of them either didn't appear, or when they appeared, they tried to, use technicalities to evade, responsibility. But some states, many states have concluded. Some people have been awarded compensations. What I have not seen is award of sanctions, against police officers responsible for abuse. I know that, of course, we know the judicial panels. The judicial panel was one of the outcomes of the demands by the NSAS protesters. One of the 5-point demands, the demand that police officers responsible for human rights violations should be investigated and brought to account. So it's an opportunity, which I hope that will not be, wasted. It's an opportunity for the state to demonstrate that it's truly committed to ensuring discipline, accountability, and justice for those who have been victimized by the police. Like I said, whereas I know that a number of victims have received compensations, we need to see more of also some of the perpetrators being brought to account as deterrence and as a way of sending a clear message that human rights violations will not be tolerated by government. A lot of states have concluded, and I know that not all of them have awarded compensations. I know that reports are being sent to the vice president, who is coordinating the reports from the various states. So we look forward that hope will not be betrayed, and that those victims who have looked up to these panels in the various states to give them justice will not fail them, and that those who have committed human rights violations will, be brought to book in accordance with the law.
Okay. Thank you so much for that feedback. It's at least is a start that at least a few people are getting compensated. But just trying to make sure that the perpetrators are actually held to book is one more of the challenge. So it looks like, let me see, I haven't gotten a question, but I have a comment here. This is by Omotayo Ajayi from LinkedIn. He said, police is the reflection of a bad government. Once we change the constitution to a people constitution, then we can change the government. Simple. Then simple. So, which is kind of in tandem with the conversation that we're having. So what I'm going to do is just get you to give us your final thoughts, and then so that I can get you out of here in good time. So can you give us your final thoughts?
Well, is to, first of all, thank you for this opportunity, for us to look at the, state of security in the country, and to highlight the important role that the police can play in supporting democracy and staying out of politics, and the need for the government to adequately fund the police, because lack of adequate funding is responsible for the police having to rely on other means to raise funds to run basic operations. So if we want to deal with corruption, if we want to stamp out corruption and abuse in the police, the government must adequately fund the police and humanize the police by also ensuring adequate welfare for the personnel to reduce corruption and abuse. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for your time, sir. This was a very, very robust conversation on police security, security forces and their role in the shrinking civic space. So thank you so much, sir, for your time.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Okay, so again, thank you all so much for listening to Devsectorseries with Mr. Okechukwu Nwanguma, the Executive Director of the Rule of Law and Accountability Advocacy Center, RULAAC. So I hope you enjoyed this session on security forces and their role in the shrinking civic space. So I'm just going to give you guys some quick announcements. I transcribed the episodes of our live broadcast. If you look at the articles that I have on LinkedIn, I have an overview of all the Devsectorseries episodes, from the very first guest to all the way down to Crystal Chigbu from the Radio Foundation. So from after conducting completing that article, I've now begun to transcribe each episode, so that folks that just want to read it or just get a refresher on the episode, they can do that and share the articles around, because I want to connect the work of civil society to the general public. So show some love, read and share the articles. So the last two that I completed are the ones with Oluseyi Oyebisi, the Executive Director of the Nigerian Network of NGOs, and Dr. Koli Shetima, the Director of the MacArthur Foundation Africa. So check out those LinkedIn articles. Visit my LinkedIn profile to view those articles. And some of them I've posted on all my channels, so you can take a look at that. I've also published them on Medium. So subsequently, when my website is ready, www.socialimpact.ng, once it's ready, the articles will be on the blog. So our next guest next week is the former UNICEF chief, Soji Adeniyi. We're going to be talking about education and insecurity in Nigeria. You do not want to miss this. We've talked about security forces and their role in the shrinking civic space. We're going to be talking about education and insecurity. You don't want to miss this. Finally, in addition, the Social Impact Masterclass e-learning beta launch will be soon, in the next few weeks. We're getting the website together, structuring everything, and the beta launch will soon be available. So if you want to participate in this, please send me a message, okay? So thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you again next week, guys. Let us all change the world together. Take care.